lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me again is another awesome guest. I have Pornsak Pichetshote with me to talk his new book, The Good Asian. You probably know his work also from Infidel, which critically acclaimed. Everybody loved it. It's been optioned for a film, I believe, if I'm correct. So, welcome, dude. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's really fun to be here.
My pleasure. I mean, it's always nice when I get approached by a creator as having to like hound them for the interview. So thank you for reaching out.
No.
The talk book, dude. I mean, first of all, you're doing a genre that is probably next to slice of life is my favorite, and that's noir.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
That's
I'm
great.
really stoked to see another addition into the genre. But before we get into the book, for everybody that's maybe not as familiar with your work, could you just talk a little bit about yourself? Like how you got into comics as a kid, and what took you from a fan to like, you know what, I'm gonna do this myself. I want to create my own titles.
It's funny. I when I was a kid, I would just it's curious. Like I don't have a story that involves like how I got my first comic. All I really know is when I was a kid, I was just into comics and sort of
Okay.
and they were around and I liked them. Where it escalated though was when I was 12, my family moved to Thailand and I went with them to Thailand, and and I kind of really missed sort of being in America, and so comics being cheap, comics and TV were the two things I gravitated towards, and I would just consume as much as I could. And and not having a lot of money when I was a kid, if I had one comic, I would read it like 8,000 times, and I would know the
Yeah.
creators and all that kind of stuff, and know everything about it. And so it's funny, like a professor would later like psychoanalyze me and all that sort of stuff, and was just kind of like, I think you're probably like looking at TV and comics as a way, because you missed America so much. It was like your lifeline back to America. It's almost like you're trying to figure out who you would be if you never left, and like that always really stuck with me. Like I think that's really true, and so I think that's why I got into writing and all this sort of stuff. But the irony was for the longest time, I was writing prose fiction, I was doing screenplays, but I didn't want to get into comics because that was like the one thing I did for fun. Like the one thing I did for fun was show up on Wednesdays, see the new books and all that kind of stuff. And then I hit a period where I decided to sort of like freelance full time, not do a full time job, and just take that road and see where it went. And a friend of mine like kind of sent me an email out of the blue saying, listen, Karen Berg Vertigo is looking for an assistant editor. And I thought and I don't know what any of those words mean, but it feels like you would. And I thought you'd be into it. And again, I wasn't looking for a full-time job, but I was such a Vertigo fan. I just kind of went in and it's like, I just really want to meet Karen Berger. So I just went in to just like meet Karen. And that first interview went into an editing test, which went into a second interview, which led her to offer me the job. And the whole time I was just like, I don't know if I want a full-time job. Like I told myself I was going to freelance, but I kind of figured it's like, well, even freelancing, I, occasionally have to take these 3 to 6 month temp jobs just to make money afloat. So think of this as like a year-long temp job. And then I'll just jump back into sort of the freelance world. But I really wanted to learn what it was like from that side of the desk. And plus Karen was working with like, my favorite writers, Grant Morrison and Peter Milligan and everybody. So I felt like I could learn so much just from even a year at this job. And then that sort of, a year led to like 7 years because I just love working there so much. And then at that point, Jeff Johns had sort of invited me to be part of a think tank to on the West Coast to turn comics into other media. And that seemed like something I couldn't say no to, or at least if I said no, I would probably regret it. Or I should say, I did the math in my head because I love New York and I wasn't a big fan of LA, but I was kind of like, well, I'll probably regret not going more if I regretted going, because if I regretted going, I could just always come back. But if I didn't go, I wouldn't know what it was. And so then I worked there and kind of, helped start the TV division and worked on sort of the Arrowverse shows. But then I just sort of hit a point where, I had always been writing throughout that time and I missed it. And, I got to the point in my career as an executive where I felt like I was getting further and further away from creative boots on the ground. I was starting to manage people, and that was never why I got into any of this. And so I decided to just, start writing and focusing on my own stories. And then sort of since then, I've been kind of, I tried to put a comic out. I tried to get on a TV show, and a whole lot of nothing happened for about 2 years. And then all of a sudden, both kind of happened at the same time. And so Infidel came out. I started getting staffed on television, and I've been trying to like spin these plates simultaneously and not have either of them hit the ground ever since.
I mean, first of all, Vertigo is like one of my no, it's my favorite imprint of all time since I've read comics. You know, like, and I don't, because I can't say company because it's like that's DC, and I
Right.
can say that DC is my favorite company because there's
Right.
moments where like I'm not feeling what they're doing.
Yeah.
But Karen Berger and Shelley Bond were the two editors' names that I ever paid attention to, and if
Yeah.
I saw their name on a book, I'm like, I'm probably gonna like this book, you know. So I'm kind of, I'll say I'm kind of like jealous. So like, that's a fucking cool story, dude. Like that you just like landed at Vertigo. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, before we get into like your work, I just want to like ask because like I don't often get the chance to like really talk to people from Vertigo like that work behind the scenes. What was that time like? Like, what kind of projects, what kind of creatives were you like working?
It was amazing. Honestly, it was amazing. It was such a dream experience for me. You know, my first book was Grant Morrison's The Filth. And like I'm a huge Grant Morrison fan. So like the very first comic with my name in the credits was like, I think The Filth number 13 or something like that. So like that was a trip. So, you know, I got to assist her on that. I got to assist her on Darren Aronofsky's and Ken Williams' The Fountain, Rick Veitch's Can't Get No, Peter Milligan when he was doing Human Target. I worked with Will Dennis on The Losers with Andy Diggle and Jock, one of my other books at the time. There were a lot of, when I started off, there were a lot of sort of graphic novels and sort of mini series. I'm trying to think. I feel like those, when I started off at least, those were the books. And then, after that, it would extend. I worked with Jeff Lemire on Sweet Tooth, worked with Mike Carey and Peter Gross on The Unwritten. I worked with Joshua Dysart and Enrique Breccia first on Swamp Thing, and then with Josh and Alberto Ponticelli on Unknown Soldier. I worked with Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba on Day Tripper.
Oh my God, one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah,
I love that book. It's so dope.
That's a great book. And so like, it was so creatively fulfilling. And the thing I kind of love about Vertigo at the time was everyone kind of had every editor kind of had their own superpower, that thing that they were really good at. And so it was a great place to learn. And comics has always been this place where, you're not going to get very far if you wait for someone to teach you things. You kind of just have to like, be sharp on your feet and be like, okay, I want to learn from this person. I want to learn from this person. I want to, and at the time it was great to sort of, all those editors you had, Shelley Bond and Will Dennis and John Venkin and Bob Schreck and Joan Hilty. And so there was opportunities to see what everyone does really well. And so like, okay, I want to learn this aspect of it, and I want to learn that aspect and sort of take it on. So it was such a great, it was one of the best times of my life. I'm still close to like everyone I was working with at that time. Like, it's just, yeah, it was everything you wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an exciting time. I mean, like I've developed sort of like a friendship with Shelley Bond. I mean, she's a guest on my channel like multiple times.
Cool.
I've often said like I would love to, like, if I could pick someone to apprentice under, it would be Shelley Bond, because like I just love everything she does. I mean, like the way she curates projects.
Yeah.
I think it's like I can't name another editor that does kind of like what she does. So it's like be able to talk to somebody else that was a behind the scenes, like I said, behind the scenes, because she's the only person from Vertigo that was in an editorial capacity that I've talked to. So yeah, just the type of books that Vertigo put out. I'm still sad that it's gone. I'm still a little salty about the way it ended.
Same here.
But whatever. I know it's comics.
The one thing I always sort of say about Vertigo is that you can't deny its influence. And even though Vertigo as a place no longer exists, the spirit of Vertigo, I think, is all through comics now. So you can see it what Eric Harburn is doing in Boom. You can see it. You can see it in a good chunk of the Image books. Mark Doyle is at IDW now. So like, even though Vertigo as a place is no longer in one sort of place, I feel like the things that Vertigo did in that spirit, Karen's at Dark Horse, like you see it all through comics now.
I agree. Speaking of seeing it all through comics, I'm seeing it in your new book, The Good Agent.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a big compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, I did not read all 3 issues that you sent me. for two reasons. One,
Okay.
one, the link fucking got lost, like it didn't work for
Oh,
some.
did it? It
Which is
did?
not.
Oh
Hold on, but
man.
hold on. It's not a big deal though because I get the PDF. So I had the first one. I read the first issue,
Uh-huh.
but I am more of like I need to read it in print kind of thing.
I
Only reason I'll read a PDF is if I'm going to talk to a creator about the book before it's dropped.
I totally hear that. I actually do the exact same thing. So like Image will give us like advanced PDFs, and if I like a book, I'll read like the first, maybe the second issue in PDFs, and then after that, I want to hold it in my hands. And I think for that reason, because I am such like I am the guy with like 1,000 long boxes, and like if I buy a trade, if I have a chance to pick up the individual issues, I'll pick up the individual issues and like sell the trade to a used bookstore or something like that. Like I'm that person. So I love like comic. I love like, staple stitch sort of comics. And as a result, like I think that influences everything I do. So like even the issue, like if you read the PDF, there's a little bit more, not in terms of story, but like a little bit more back matter in terms of the actual sort of physical comic. I'm like the worst math person in the world. And so like it turns out we had more pages than I thought. So we were able to add like a couple design pages sort of here and there. So so I'm a very big believer that like, even if you sort of, even for the people for the people in the press and all that, and reviewers who've read the PDFs, like I like to think that the actual physical comic gives you a little bit more on top of that.
And that's another thing. Like, I mean, speaking of like noir, like Brubaker and Phillips, that was the reason to pick up their books on a monthly basis was the back matter that they put in.
Yeah,
On top of the fact that
yeah.
their stuff is like 10 out of 10 every single time.
Oh, every single time, every single
So,
time. Yeah.
and like they're the reason I love the noir genre, which is why when I found out, like I saw the announcement for the book and I'm like, oh, dope, it's a noir. And then you emailed me, I think like I saw the announcement and I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, I want to
That's
the
awesome.
book.
That's
Of
awesome.
course. I first off, for anybody that doesn't know about the book, can you really quick, because not everybody reads solicits.
Sure.
You'd be shocked how many people come to comics who don't even know a book is out yet. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody, but
No, no, no.
people just that's not their thing. They don't read synopsis. They don't pay attention to solicits. They like to just experience going to a shop, and that's cool too. But if you could share a little bit about the book, a little bit about the reason, the story behind it, and you know why this genre. After you did like horror, now you're jumping into a completely different genre.
Yeah. So I mean, so the book itself is it's a genre we're calling Chinatown noir, but credit where credit due. Ed Brubaker was the one who actually came up with the term, and I just never had the chance to like give him the credit. But it's a genre we're calling Chinatown noir. It's a 1936 detective mystery set in San Francisco Chinatown about the first generation of Americans that grew up underneath the shadow of an immigration ban, the Chinese, and as and it's hopefully a classic noir in the sense of a detective goes looking for a girl, finds a bigger mystery, finds a sort of bigger kind of conspiracy, and has all those sort of classic noir moves that I personally love. But it's on this backdrop of sort of real Asian American history about what was happening in Chinatown in the 1930s, and sort of what isn't, that those aspects of history that you have to dig a little bit deeper for that has kind of been forgotten. And so that's what the book is about. And as for like where the inspiration for the book came, it came from two places. I very late in life discovered, about the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Immigration Act in 1924. And the Chinese Exclusion Act, prohibited Chinese immigrants from coming into America. And the Immigration Act in 1924 extended that for all Asians and Arabs. And I was kind of shocked that I didn't know about any of that. And meanwhile, I've always had this, ever since I was a kid or a teenager, I had this curiosity about sort of the 1930s Asian crime solvers like Charlie Chan and Mr. Moto and Mr. Wong. And they were really popular in the 1930s. Charlie Chan was popular for 50 years and had movies all over the world. It was, was like a franchise at the time. And so that interest kind of coincided with this thing, this new discovery. It's like, oh, wow, America was celebrating these Asian crime solvers at a time where like Asian immigrants couldn't come into the country. And so I kind of wanted to take that archetype, that, Asian detective archetype, and sort of re-examine it with that lens and kind of do, hopefully, if Infidel was a proper horror story with, which wanted to talk about race and xenophobia, Hopefully The Good Asian in the same way is a proper noir mystery that also wants to talk about this, history that we've kind of forgotten, or at least acknowledge it and spotlight it. So that's kind of what the book is about, and how, and what got me to sort of do it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the first issue was phenomenal. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Like, and it was I'm like I felt like it was longer than normal, and then like you said, I mean it was longer than a normal first issue. But I love the way like you're building out this world of characters. I love Edison Hark, by the way. I love
Thank you.
I love the playing of like the way that the pages are structured as well. How did
Cool.
can you talk a little bit about the artist too, and like how you guys hooked up? And
Yeah. So we met. I met Alex through. We were looking for the right artist, and Cliff Chang actually introduced our work to Alex. I think Cliff
nice.
had met him, not had met him, but had seen him again at a Skybound party, and they kind of caught up with life. And Cliff was kind of like, "You've got to." And Alex has this fantastic story where Alex, at the age of 34, Alex found out that he was adopted, and at the age of 34, he found out that he that his father was, I think, Vietnamese, or at least half Vietnamese, and that's when he found out he was Asian. And so, because before he had all these, he had all this different background, and so he had taken the time to like move his family to Vietnam just to kind of get closer to his roots. And so he was very much sort of exploring his Asian roots and what that meant, and what that meant for him and all that. And so he was talking about that with Cliff, and Cliff was just kind of like, you have to talk to Pornsak. You've got to check out Pornsak's new book. Like, I think you guys are perfect. And it was such a perfect marriage of it. And yeah, and Alex is just so good. I think, he's good at so much. He's good at the storytelling. His acting is phenomenal. Like, the thing that I can't even imagine the book without it anymore. But Alex has this amazing ability to like have a character kind of show two emotions at once,
Mhm.
and you can sort of see the conflict. And like, I don't even totally know how it's possible, because like, I've worked with art like Aaron Campbell on my last book, Infidel. Like, he uses photo ref and he uses actors and all that, and that I kind of understand. But Alex comes from a different school completely, so there are no sort of actors or photo refs or anything like that. So it kind of all comes through his head, and so the fact that like he can embody that and portray that so succinctly, and kind of you can show this conflicted character. I'm constantly amazed by that. And in terms of like the page layout, I actually really appreciate you digging it, because like one of the things that we wanted is, we kind of wanted the book to have a different rhythm than sort of most contemporary comics do. And again, going back to Brubaker, like the thing I love about Brubaker is I've loved Brubaker all through his career, but like in his early books, if you notice, it's something I noticed really early on, is he had a little bit of a different tempo. There were 4 tiers to a page, and it
Yeah.
gave you just a little bit. The comic felt a little denser. It felt like a little bit. The tempo was a little bit different, and to me, that there was something a little, more old school about it, that kind of felt right for this kind of book. Like, those old comics were denser. They so many of them came from comic strips that were just like, laid up on top of each other
Mhm.
onto a page. And so you got like got 3 to 4 tiers out of that. So that was part of the thing too, of just like wanting the comic to you know, have a little bit of an anachronistic sort of rhythm to it. So it didn't totally feel like a contemporary comic book, and just, in that very subtle way.
Yeah, it's like I said, it felt very Vertigo-esque to me.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you.
it had the like sometimes you're saying dense. Like sometimes I feel like there's certain comics that are just so wordy, and I'm
Yeah.
so much text, and it takes me out of the story because like I'm focusing too much on the words and not being able to enjoy the art. This was the perfect blend of,
Thank you.
and the way Alex is depicting Edison, like he's like looking at the
Yeah.
detecting stuff, right? So like you see him,
Yeah.
like he'll highlight the certain like things. I like that aspect too because I love detective stories. I just love this noir genre, and like I love that you're setting it in the 30s and it's a period piece. That's also something I always really enjoy. So you're taking technology completely out of it. It's
Yeah.
an old school detective story. I also, you're talking about it's set in Chinatown, and you're dealing with like the xenophobia, right, of towards Asian culture and Asian people. And I feel like that in and of itself is kind of timely in terms of like
Yeah.
what we're dealing with in the world today. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something that's just today, you know. It's decades of
Yeah.
kind of shit, and you know, we had the Black Lives Matter movement, and then with the pandemic, and like we had a certain had a certain person that was the head of our country saying what he's saying, and thank God he's no longer here. So was that also an important aspect of why you wanted to tell the story set within this realm, within this world, or was this story already? Did you already have this like, and it just happened? It just like was happenstance.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the story, I already had the story, and you know, originally the goal was I just wanted to, you know, it was history that we weren't sort of paying attention to, and I wanted to showcase it and all that. And then as we we're working on it, the book got more and more timely, and you know, almost disturbingly so, and almost like you know, it's still something that, you know, it's not my first instinct on how to talk about it comfortably, because it's, you know, when we launched the book, it happened in the third week of February, and that was like 2 weeks after the Lunar New Year. And a lot of, while there had been escalating attacks on elderly Asians sort of all through 2020, it hit a peak around the Lunar New Year because a lot of them were getting attacked for their Lunar New Year money while they were making deposits. So that was when things really kind of, you know, things got very loud. And around that week, like the national news, like one outlet had covered it. And so it was this really weird sort of feeling for me of like, the two things obviously aren't unrelated. And so I couldn't like not talk about it. But at the same time, the last thing you want to do is want to be seen as, or not want to be seen, but the last thing you want to do is want to try to profit off of like, you know, horrible things that are happening currently. And so it's been constantly you know, it's something I constantly sort of go back and forth on, like how to talk about, and what is the right amount to lean in, what is the respectful amount to lean in and not lean back, and all that. And the only thing I can say is that like where the book came from this idea that there's a lot of Asian American history that we don't talk about and we don't teach in school, and that provides a context for a lot of what's happening right now. And so the two aren't by any means sort of unrelated, and I think it's important to know that context to sort of see how we got to the point that we're at now.
Yeah, this isn't the only book. There was another book. I the name is escaping me, but it just like the way it was released and when it came out was very
Yeah.
timely as well. But I think that you could almost say that anytime it comes out, right? Like this is
Yeah.
always around, and
Yeah.
I think that the way you're kind of towing the line between, it's not preachy, right? But you're informing the reader of stuff that took place set in a fictional world as well, right? As a writer, how do you kind of toe that line to where you don't like want to come off like you're preachy, right?
Yeah.
You also want to inform the reader. Like I said, well, yeah, like I said, you also want to inform the reader without kind of like beating them over the head with it. You know what
Yeah, I think a lot of it, at least this is the strategy for the good Asian, a lot of it's just acknowledging sort of
I mean? Okay.
what happened. And you know, I think the big half of the I mean, like there's both halves that are important. Is there's the argument half and there's the acknowledgement half. And so what I do in my books, at the very least, is I focus on acknowledgement. And now part of the acknowledgement is that, you know, there is an agenda to that acknowledgement as well. But I feel like so what you're talking about of like how do you still tell line for preachy is like for me, you know, and again, it works well for a detective story. There is a just the facts kind of thing. Like these are the facts that happen. If A
Mhm.
plus B, this equals C, and all that. And in the context of this book, I'm not necessarily trying to editorialize that this led to this, led to this. But one of the things I am saying, and I have the benefit of history on my side, is to say, well, I can point to this thing happening, this thing happening, and that thing happening. And you can draw your own conclusions on why they happened. It seems pretty clear to me, though, why that happened. You know, and so I think at least the strategy for my book is that the evidence and the facts are so powerful in and of themselves, are so uncontroversial in themselves, that it doesn't need a little any extra for me. At least that's
Right.
my personal perspective on it.
Yeah. I mean, and are we, well, first of all, I think it's really cool to see more diversity in comics, right? We're seeing
Hmm.
more like Asian representation. I know that my manager that I work with at the
Yeah,
shop, right? Like he kind of
yeah,
talks about that too, like that sometimes there's not always enough representation for like everybody in comics, and
Yeah.
we're seeing more of it with. There's a couple other books that have been announced through Image too that we're seeing,
Yeah.
which, and I enjoy that because I don't want to see the same thing
Right.
over and over and over again. And one thing I like about Edison Hart too is in this world, right? He's a detective, so he's like, and then you show him like in the same aspect, he's in the same scene with two cops and what they're doing to that lady at her outside of her shop, and
Yeah.
like, so how much of that is going to play a factor in like in the way he's perceived by some of these cops that are, I mean, they're racist. I mean, there's no other way to say it. So what I want to know is how much of that racism is Edison going to deal with, or is he going to deal with that as well as he's kind of on this case?
I mean, yes, he's going to deal with that all the way through. I mean, that racism is part of his life, and so it is something that, and you'll sort of see. And when we say deal with racism, there's different ways to sort of talk. There's different ways to talk about that, but that racism is something that it's a fact of life at the time. And so just dealing with the time and portraying the time honestly means sort of dealing with the racism. Now, does that mean he's going to punch out racists or anything like that? Like we'll see where the book takes us. But in terms of dealing with the racism of the time, that is sort of part of his life, and that is sort of his everyday. He kind of has to like figure out how to navigate that.
Okay. And The Good Asian, what the decision behind the title, what, I mean, it doesn't really, like, if you see The Good Asian, you have no idea it's a detective story. So what what was the thought behind that title specifically?
There's a couple different things. I mean, one, there's a little bit harking back to sort of like noirs, like The Good German and all that kind of stuff. But I think also too, like The Good Asian, it's a play on a couple different things. Certainly Asians kind of, had to shadow the model minority myth to kind of sort of live under. So there's a play on that, but there's also a play on sort of Edison Hart, who wants to do the right thing, and doing the right thing, by a certain by a certain definition is like you follow the laws, you uphold the laws, and so if you take that to the extreme, it's you work to protect and uphold the laws. But what happens when you're living in a time where people like yourself aren't prioritized by the law? Like what does being a good Asian or a good person of color or a good person in general sort of mean when that happens? And so you find yourself kind of caught between two worlds and straddling two worlds, which to me, feels like it kind of embodies and encapsulates sort of the Asian American experience. And so to me, that's kind of what all this sort of stuff is. It's a play on a couple different things.
Okay. And it's 9 issues, which in and of itself is it's a number.
Yeah.
It bothers me. It's just, you don't usually see 4 issues, 5, 6, and then from 6 it'll just jump to 12 for the most.
Yeah. No, if I could have made this 6 issues, I would have in a heartbeat.
Okay.
Like 9 issues is a little bit of a scary number for me too, for exactly the reasons you're talking about. It's like a little bit between one and a little bit of the other. But it was really important to just have the length of the series just fit the story. And so we could have extended it 2 or 3 or 4 issues, but then it just feels like the story would lose its punch if we shrunk it down. The story would have lost something. So the 9 issues that we're at is the most. And I still, like, fingers crossed, like, who knows if I end up like extending an issue because I can't wrap everything up or whatever the case may be. And Lord knows I hope that doesn't happen. But it was really, it really kind of came from the story. The story wanted to talk about a bunch of things. And so this was the right amount of issues to talk about all the things the story wants to talk about.
Okay. Is there potential for more? I mean,
yes. Okay. So I am way too superstitious to commit to anything before, we'll see how the book does. We'll see if there's an audience for the book. If the book succeeds, there's definitely room for sequels and prequels and all that kind of stuff. Unlike Infidel, which is, even Infidel, there's room for that in a different way. But yes, there's room for more Edison Hart stories, depending on how the response is.
Okay, because I think there needs to be more detective like stories like this on the stands, and if it's any indication, how it's selling at our shop, I think that there's a demand for it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
So
great to
let's
hear.
so I do like real quick. I do want to talk about, you're doing a signature series for the
Yeah.
occasion at the shop that I work at, Collector's Paradise, all 3 locations. Can you share a little bit about that and what that's going to entail for people that want to, pre-order the set?
Sure, sure. And fill in the blanks if I forget anything.
Okay.
But
All right.
there are 2 sets. It comes with a signed certificate of authenticity. You can get the set with all the wonderful Dave Johnson covers, who's like one of my favorite cover artists, and you can get sort of our variant covers. And our variant covers is basically every Asian American, Asian descent sort of artists that I've always wanted to work with but never had the chance. Like those are it's all like my wish list of people I've never hung out with before that I really want to hang out with. It's like everyone who does those covers. But yeah, you get the certificate of authenticity. I think the way it's sort of set up is that they'll ship it to you twice. So like issues 1 through 4, once the 4th issue comes out, the 4 issues will get shipped to you, and then 5 through 9 will get shipped to you in a second batch, and that's there to sort of save on shipping.
And I'm not just saying this because I work at the shop, but when Ed, the owner, came up with the idea, it's because there couldn't be signings for the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's been really cool because, like, I think that maybe sometimes it'll push people over the edge because it's more in your face, like, hey, we're doing this with this book. And then it kind of gets people to buy it. And, like, even though people can come in shops, like, we're still doing it. And I think it's awesome because we still can't necessarily have signings, right? I mean, I know there's some shops that do it, but, like, I don't know about you, but if I'm going to a I don't want to have to stand across the room from the
yeah.
I want to go up to chat with them and, like, possibly take
Yeah.
or whatever. So I think it's really cool that, you're taking the time out of your day to go sign the books, really, because, like, that's a lot also for you to go. I don't know if you're going 9 times or how you're doing
I
it.
think I'd be going 9 times.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean
I don't think there's any other way to do it.
yeah. So I mean, I think it's really cool of you to do, and I hope that anybody that's on the fence, like, pre-order the set, man. I think you even get a little bit of a discount when you pre-order the set with us.
Yes.
And the response has been pretty good. I mean, I see the numbers,
Awesome.
so I'm excited for the book. I can't wait for it to come out. I can't wait for everybody else to read it. By the time this interview goes up, the book will be out. So, I mean, we're not spoiling anything by what we're talking about. I do want to know, though, before we kind of like wrap it up, is there any other books that you're working on that you got in the works, or any ideas that you're?
In terms of comics, there is some stuff that I'm working on right now. It's too early, unfortunately, to talk about it yet. But yes, there is something else that I'm working on, and I've got a couple, like, I do short stories sort of all the time. So like, I think I have a short story I have a Ryan Choi short story in the DC Festival of Heroes that's out like
Nice.
that week after the first issue of The Good Asian comes out. And I've got 1 or 2 other short stories that are sort of flinging it out there. I like short stories because it's really part of my challenge is I'm trying to balance TV and comics work. So short stories are very easy to kind of slot into that schedule. But we'll see. I hopefully will have another sort of bigger project to announce sort of in a couple months. Maybe not. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
I'm still trying to figure out like my pandemic bandwidth in terms of work for all that sort of stuff. But we'll see. Maybe yeah.
Right on. And I mean, besides comics, what do you got going on film and TV?
Right now, I'm writing on a show for HBO Max. I can't say. I actually don't know if I can say what the name of the show, because it's one of those things that, like, they didn't say one way or the other, and so I just always assume that you can't, because all these things are top secret nowadays.
Right. I got it.
Because I don't want to get in trouble. So yeah, but I'm working. The day job is, which I quite love, is I'm writing on a show for HBO Max right now.
All right, cool. And I've been asking creators that I'm talking to, kind of, for everybody listening, also for myself, because it's always, sometimes discovering something new. What comics or books are you currently like really into, or what's like a book that you read recently that really kind of blew you away?
I mean, it isn't recently, but I feel like every time I'm asked this question, I can't not talk about Dave Lapin's Stray Bullets, because I feel like it's like those just, and it's like, I just don't feel like enough people talk about that, but it's so, like, I think it's so good, people take it for granted how good it is.
I agree.
So yeah, so there's that. What else have I been reading? Lately? I've been reading sort of a bunch of a bunch of I really enjoyed The Many Deaths of Layla's Star, which I think comes
Oh
out
my God.
today
So
from Ram
good.
V. Yeah,
Yeah.
really enjoyed. I think Boom's been killing it, you know,
Yeah.
with their stuff. I really liked Home from Julio Anta, that I think came out recently. What else have I every time I'm asked this question, like I instantly blank on like
I know. I do this to
what I could
everybody when
read.
I ask them. They're like, "Fuck, I can't remember. I can't think."
Yeah,
They're like, "I'm always gonna leave something off," you know. Like, and I get
I
it.
know.
People ask me for recommendations sometimes at the shop. I'll be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, stuff," and then they'll leave, and I'm like, "Fuck, should have,"
Yeah.
you know.
I'm trying to
So
think what was the last thing. I mean, everyone knows this is great, but Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up with Me. I just read like in the past couple months, and that's so good. Reckless is so good. The Brubaker Phillips book. Speaking of them, what else? I feel like I just read a issue one that I loved, and now I'm blanking on what the title is. I mean, the sales have shown this, but like, haha is like fantastic by
yeah.
Will Maxwell Prince. Like, that's so good. Book, you know, and there's a couple books that I'm like super excited. Like the next books on my pile that I can't wait to read is Stray Dogs from Image.
So good. I love that book.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that. It's literally next on my pile. Shadow Doctor by Aftershock. Proctor Valley Road from Boom. Like those three books are like the next like need to find some time. Maybe hopefully this weekend I'll be
All
able
right.
to find the time to kind of crack into them.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for doing this. I know you're very busy. I know you got to get to work soon. So, before I let you get back to your day, could you real quick share where we can find you online? And I'm going to drop all those links down below in the comments as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I'm real_pornsack at Twitter and real_psack on Instagram.
All right, cool, man. And I'm like I said, I'll drop those links down below. Everybody that's listening or watching, I'm also going to drop the link for the signature series for The Good Asian.
Awesome.
Make sure you check out the book. This will be up the day after it releases. So if you didn't pick it up this week, make sure you pick it up. It was dope. And again, thank you for taking time to chat with me. And I would love to do this with you again, dude.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was a huge amount of fun. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good one. I'll talk to you.